Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Bucher, Vaslin, North America and lamothe-abiet webinar. Today, we're going to talk about malolactic fermentation with a focus on co-inoculation. My name is Eglantine.chauffour. I will be your speaker today. I'm the winemaking product manager for Bucher, Vaslin, North America. So first of all, let me introduce you the two partners for this presentation today. We have Bucher Vaslin, designer, manufacturer, and seller of material for grape and wine processing since 1856. So 162 years of expertise and knowledge all around the world. In North America, they are partnering with lamothe-abiet, winemaking product brand that is renowned for their high quality and premium product. They have been established in Bordeaux in 1878, so 140 years of winemaking experience and expertise, mainly focused in Europe. We are now making it available for you in North America. So this presentation is going to be half an hour presentation followed by a 10 minutes question and answer. We're going to talk about the importance of using selected malolactic strains, also all the factors that can impact the success of malolactic fermentation, and then the advantage, the risk, and the application of co-inoculation. If you do have any connectivity issue, please contact the support.zoom.us. They will have all the answer you need. So malolactic fermentation is the conversion of malic acid into lactic acid by lactic acid bacteria. Why do we do this? Mainly for organoleptic impact. So we are reducing the acidity. We are transforming malic acid into lactic acid, which is a weaker acid. So we also increase the aromatic complexity and we are softening the mouthfeel. The second point and second reason why we would do it is to ensure microbiological stability. So to achieve this objective, there is one important point which is required. We want Inococcus honey to be the bacteria that conduct malolactic fermentation. Why? Because this bacteria is very well adapted to wine condition. That's the bacteria that has the best aromatics, but also it's a bacteria that is not considered as spoilage and is not going to create a lot of flavor or microbial deviation. So very important that we control the strains that is going to do the malolactic fermentation. Why do we want to control the strains? Why we want to make sure it's an Inococcus honey that is fermenting and a good one? Because it could be also that Lactobacillus, Pediococcus, or other Inococcus can be present in the wine and start to make the malolactic fermentation. In this case, we will lose control on the speed and we will not even ensure the malolactic fermentation. So inoculating with a selected ml strains of bacteria will ensure you speed and completion of malolactic fermentation. Also, we are going to limit off flavor. There is a lot of lactic acid bacteria that have enzymatic activities that can produce actually the precursors of volatile phenol, which start to be dangerous if you have any contamination of Brettanomyces. Brettanomyces is going to be using these precursors of volatile phenol to produce volatile phenol, and in this case, you're increasing the risk of spoilage by Brettanomyces. Also, there is lactic acid bacteria, especially lactobacillus, that can produce compounds that are giving an aftertaste in the wine that is called mousiness. So this aftertaste is basically tasting like a dead mouse or a cage with mouse urine. If you don't know what it is, you are very lucky. If you do, you probably tasted once and you remember it all your life. It's a very unpleasant aftertaste that makes the wine completely undrinkable and also very difficult to treat. So better to avoid it. Some of characteristics that can happen with uncontrolled malolactic bacteria development can be biogenic amines. So biogenic amines are associated with aromas such as pond, stagnant water, fish food, but also rotten flesh. And in addition to this off flavor, biogenic amines are responsible for headache. So obviously, if you drink too much wine, headache can come from something else, but biogenic amines are actually allergenic. They can create headache, they can create allergenic reactions, and they can, in a worst case scenario, be considered as cancerogen. Some countries are limiting them, so it is very important to understand and choose a bacteria that will not produce these compounds. So as you can see in the graph on your right side, you can see that when we leave it going wild, most likely we are going to have biogenic amines production, while if we use a selected strains, in this case UNO1, we are limiting this production. Other off flavor can be linked to diacetyl production, which in some cases can be wanted because you get these buttery, creamy characters. But then if it starts to be too much, you get popcorn in the cinema type of aromas, or also rancid or almond oil. And then to finish on off flavor, which is actually not really an exhaustive list, but you can have a big increase of VA. So you just have to remember that lactic acid bacteria, deviation of lactic acid bacteria are all the faults you can find in wine. So this is one of the most common issue that we can find in wine, is a problem with lactic acid bacteria. So it is very important to control the strains that will be dominant and conduct the malolactic fermentation. Also, it is important to consider the wine conditions. Wine can be a very hostile environment for malolactic bacteria, and some parameters need an extra attention to make sure Inococcus honey can actually survive in the wine and can conduct properly the malolactic fermentation. These factors are listed here. So the 4 main factors that will impact the development of Inococcus honey are pH. If you get a too low pH, it's going to be very difficult for Inococcus honey to develop. In too high situation of pH, Inococcus is very comfortable, but unfortunately, Lactobacillus and Pediococcus are even more comfortable, and then it becomes a very strong competition with other lactic acid bacteria. Then Inococcus is very sensitive to sulfur, so we are talking about a sulfur, we want a sulfur below 50 milligram per liter and a free sulfur below 12 milligram per liter to be in good condition. Above this, it starts to be stressful. Concentration of ethanol, usually above 15%, start to be a little bit stressful for the bacteria. And then temperature, below 50 Fahrenheit or above 86 Fahrenheit, start to be difficult condition for the bacteria. Other point that can impact Inococcus honey development, microbial competition. So when I talk about microbial competition, I'm talking about competing for nutrients, but also producing inhibitors, such as toxin, medium chain fatty acids, VA, or even sulfur. Ease of alcoholic fermentation. So obviously a yeast that is much stronger than a bacteria, if the yeast doesn't survive in the environment, the bacteria will have some issue to survive too. So you have to think that if you're struggling with your alcoholic fermentation, you will probably need to address this issue and fix it before putting your bacteria, because your bacteria will probably be stuck as well. Then low malic acid content, obviously there is not too much malic acid, it becomes complicated for the bacteria to find it and to convert it. The other factors that are a little bit more minor factors, pesticide residue and phenolic content can act as a toxin and inhibit the good development of malolactic fermentation, bacteria, sorry. So an important point is that nowadays with climate change and consumer preference evolution, the wine compositions are changing, and we are having wine that have a higher pH, which means higher microbial contamination and competition, but also higher alcohol, higher phenolic content, lower malic acids, which means we are increasing the risk of malolactic fermentation difficulties. The risk of malolactic fermentation, sorry. So now we actually, within these conditions, some techniques are becoming more and more used in order to reduce the risk and ensure malolactic fermentation in difficult conditions. And one of these techniques is co-inoculation, which I'm going to talk about right now. So co-inoculation is a practice of inoculated selected wine bacteria at the beginning of the winemaking process. So shortly after yeast inoculation. So basically we are putting yeast, and as soon as the fermentation starts, 24 hours after the fermentation starts, we are putting bacteria. And we are conducting alcoholic and malolactic fermentations together. Why do we want to do this? So first reason, we can secure malolactic fermentation because we are giving more favorable condition for the bacteria with better and easier acclimatation to the environment. Second point, we are limiting the risk of spoilage as we are using the bacteria as a bioprotection. We are colonizing the environment with a strain that we know is positive, avoid leaving no space for the spoilage microbes. The third point is that we are actually limiting the risk of oxidation, since we are limiting this moment where there is less protection. We are making the wine faster, but also we are changing organoleptic profile, so we create less buttery wine, fruitier and fresher wines. The fourth point is that we are saving time. Co-inoculations shortens significantly the length of malolactic fermentation. And it's a practice that is actually cost effective. So we're gonna see all these points later during the presentation with more detail. But one important thing that I want to talk about is that there is some conditions to co-inoculation. Otherwise it would be too magic, let's say. So for co-inoculation to happen properly and these 5 points to be respected, you need a right yeast bacteria compatibility. If you have the wrong tandem, as you can see on the picture, if your yeast goes in one way and the bacteria goes in one way, basically they are gonna kill each other and you're gonna end up with a stack alcoholic and a stack malolactic. Also, you will probably increase the risk of spoilage and you will have VA happening. So very important to have the right yeast bacteria couple. You want to limit your SO2 addition just to make sure your bacteria will ferment properly. So below 8 grams per hectoliter at crusher, which is actually completely doable. And then you want to control the fermentation temperature below 86 Fahrenheit. When talking about co-inoculation, it's important to address the common concern of VA production by lactic acid bacteria. So this as well, if yeast gets stuck and you have some residual sugar and a random bacteria there, the bacteria will finish malic acid and then go to sugar and produce VA. This happens when you have a random yeast and bacteria couple. Again, the yeast and bacteria couple is the most important requirement to make sure these 5 points happen, and then you don't end up with high VA and stack fermentations. Okay, so let's see point one by one. Why do I say co-inoculation can secure malolactic fermentation? Because the environment is more favorable. We have less inhibitors, we have lower ethanol, we have lower phenolic content, and we have low free SO2. Mainly because we didn't extract the phenolic content yet, we didn't produce the ethanol yet, and then there is no more free SO2 because yeast is consuming it. Also, there is less medium chain fatty acids that are produced by the yeast. Yeast can produce this medium chain fatty acids when the yeast is stressed, and usually when there is higher alcohol. So when about 2/3 of the fermentation and towards the end, yeast will produce these medium chain fatty acids that are toxin for bacteria. If you inoculate before this, the bacteria have time to acclimate and will not be sensitive to this toxin. There is warmer temperatures, since we are using the heat produced by the yeast. This can be a very strong argument in the northern area, as when you finish alcoholic fermentation, you usually get pretty cold temperature, and then it becomes a struggle to warm up all the tanks or barrels. You have a higher malic acid content, so we saw previously that this helps the bacteria to conduct the conversion of malic into lactic in a better way. And you have better nutrient availability. Main reason is that you have a huge buffet that is now shared by the yeast and the bacteria, so they can all take whatever they need. in a sequential inoculation, the bacteria is just eating on the leftover of the yeast. The yeast is first, eats everything she wants, she leaves whatever she doesn't want, and the bacteria comes and have all the scratch. Now, bacteria and yeast are sharing the buffet. Again, I would like to emphasize the importance of the choice of the yeast. You want a yeast that will produce low amount of medium chain fatty acids, so low amounts of other inhibitors, low VA, low SO2 production, and doesn't have high nitrogen requirement. So you want to go with a low nitrogen requirement as well. So the second point I want to talk about is limiting the risk of microbial spoilage, which is in reality the first reason why co-inoculation has been used. When we are talking about traditional inoculation, we are talking about very good condition for spoilage because we are creating a microbial vacuum. So as you can see in the graph on your right side of the screen, when we are in alcoholic fermentation, we are having yeast dominant. And then yeast are dying slowly. We are having this period where there is no protection since you don't want to put sulfur, malolactic is going to happen. You have no dominance, nobody dominates. Bacteria will, but later down the road. So you have this empty moment where there is a microbial vacuum, which means opportunity for the other microbes. No protection, warm temperature, some leftover food, that's perfect for all the other microbes such as Brettanomyces or Lactobacillus pediococcus. Below, you can see the graph of a study done by Vincent Renouf that basically studied the direct correlation between the length of malolactic fermentation and the development of Brettanomyces. So a slow malolactic fermentation is directly correlated with a high contamination of Brettanomyces. If we do co-inoculation, we are eliminating this microbial vacuum as we put alcoholic and malolactic fermentation superposed. So there is no more hole in this, no more vacuum in this microbial pathway life. Then we are going faster. So a faster malolactic fermentation means limiting the development of Brettanomyces. Last point, we are limiting the production of biogenic amines, which means we are limiting the development of spoilage lactic acid bacteria. As you can see in this study here from Dutoit, you can see that when we are in co-inoculation, so the light blue and the red, comparing to sequential, the orange and the dark blue, co-inoculation is producing much less biogenic amine than the sequential. And actually, none of histamine and tyramine, which is a pretty important point. So this is great, but now it's important also to speak about organoleptic impact. Okay, so let's see what co-inoculation can change the wine profile of the wine profile. And it has been observed in many studies that wine that undergo co-inoculation tend to be less buttery and fruitier. Why? Because there is a lower diacetyl production. We are talking about a very reduced environment. The yeast are putting the redox potential very low. And in this situation, diacetyl is going to be reduced into acetoin. So there is no accumulation of diacetyl, no or much less buttery character. There is less biogenic amine production, which we saw previously, but also it means the wines are cleaner. There is no cloud or no filter of this rotten flesh and fish pond and algae on the top of the nice aromas of the wine. So the wines appear cleaner. The co-inoculation is enhancing the fruity and fresh aroma production because the bacteria are going to produce more ester and acetate in this situation. So the wines are fruitier and more varietal. Bacteria can also express more varietal components such as noresoprenoids. To finish with this, and you can read at the bottom line, you have a lot of studies that show all the organoleptic impact of co-inoculation versus sequential. But in conclusion, wines are appearing more balanced and fuller body. So that's very interesting because we are looking at practice that is making you fresher, fruitier, and cleaner wine, but also makes you go faster in secure your malolactic fermentation, makes you go faster and limits your spoilage microorganisms. So in terms of winemaking advantage, we are pretty good. And co-inoculation also has some practical and economical advantage, which I'm gonna talk about right now. Practical and economical advantage. The first one is that we are saving time. So why do we want to save time? Because you can better organize yourself. You have a better visibility of the cellar. You can anticipate and manage your cellar better. Also, you can start stabilizing, blending, and aging your wine earlier. Second point, on wine quality. You reduce the risk of microbial contamination since you go faster, and you reduce the risk of oxidation since you go faster. Business-wise, you can start your wine tasting sooner, which can be pretty important. Some big customer wants to see the wine of the year very early, so they can actually start to buy it before the production is actually done. And you can commercialize your wine sooner too. Last but not least, cost efficient. Saving time is saving money, as everybody knows. In this case, we are reducing the labor, barrel management, we reduce the analysis cost and the energetical cost. So I'm actually missing a point here, which is sustainability. I would like to go a little bit deeper on the last point of cost efficiency and to show you some numbers and a study made in Bordeaux by Chateau Lagrange. So as you can see on the screen, Chateau Lagrange was doing everything wild, all his wine wild malolactic fermentation, and start to do co-inoculation with Excellence XR and Ono 1 that I will talk about later. And as you can see on the screen, there is an economical study that shows how much cost saving was to go 100% co-inoculation. When we were 27%, our final cost was 4.75 euro per hectoliters. When we are 100% co-inoculation, our final cost is 1.73 euro per hectoliters. So I would like to highlight this number here and this number here so you can actually see what I'm talking about. Mainly, the reason is that we reduce the electricity cost, which was 19,000 euro for the full cellar, and we went to zero. We don't have to warm up the tank anymore. Obviously, we increase the cost of malolactic bacteria since we were doing wild versus inoculated, but this doesn't at all reach the cost of electricity. We reduce the cost of analysis, we go faster, there is less analysis to do, and barrel management since we finish everything in tank. So the winemaker in Chateau Lagrange is actually now doing everything co-inoculated, and for him it's a very good way to manage the risk of contamination and to manage his entire cellar, which for him he says that he can increase the quality and he can make better quality wines. It obviously lowers the cost of production, but it lowers as well the carbon footprint. So very important point is that in addition to winemaking part, you also have a practical and cost-effective argument on co-inoculation. So now that we are all convinced about the advantage of co-inoculation, let's see together the requirements and the risk management. Yeah, and we are going to start with the most important condition to respect in order to have the proper co-inoculation and in order to have all this advantage we talked about is the yeast and bacteria couple. That is coming right now. So the yeast and bacteria couple is very important. Remember that if you have the wrong tandem, we go nowhere. With the wrong tandem, your yeast and bacteria are going to start to fight, they are going to inhibit each other, and you're going to end up with a stack alcoholic and malolactic. So lamothe-abiet did a lot of study and work on co-inoculation, and they ended up with a perfect tandem for red wine, which is NO1 and Excellence XR. Why Excellence XR is the right yeast? Because it has perfect fermentation properties, strong implantation, regular fermentation kinetic, high alcohol resistance. Also, excellent compatibility with lactic acid bacteria. Remember what goes against lactic acid bacteria. We want the yeast to not produce the toxin. So Excellence XR is producing low VA, low sulfur, and low medium chain fatty acids. So we are checking all the box. Also, it absorbs the inhibitory fatty acids, so we are actually removing them, and it has low nitrogen requirements. As you can see on the graph on your right part of the screen here, you can see that with Excellence XR, which is the orange line, we are reducing the time of alcoholic fermentation, we are reducing the lag phase between alcoholic and malolactic, and we are reducing the time of malolactic fermentation. So this yeast really is in favor of lactic acid bacteria. Sorry. Next step, organoleptic impact. It's very important when we talk about yeast to understand what is going to be the impact on the wine. And obviously, I want to talk about it. So organoleptic impact of the Excellence XR, it's a yeast that is actually the reference yeast in Bordeaux for all the high quality and premium wine. It respects the varietal expression and the terroir expression. It has a high production of polysaccharide and glycerol, so we work a lot on the mouthfeel with this yeast, and a very good phenolic extraction, so we are favoring color stability. Point where I would like to make a little bracket. Color stability is very important to talk about right now, because when you do co-inoculation, you actually lose the window where you can do micro-ox and tannins and stabilize your color, make your acetaldehyde and make your bridge between anthocyanin and tannin. So you need a yeast that will favor for color stability. So in this case, you can compensate color. Okay? So now, why do we think NO1 is great for co-inoculation? That's a very strong lactic acid bacteria that is very resistant to difficult conditions, so resist to high alcohol and low pH, but also it has a high survival rate. That's how we selected it, with 75% survival rate, a short lag phase, and a fast malolactic fermentation. It produces no biogenic amines. If you remember one of the first graphs I showed, NO1 was showing you how little biogenic amines she can produce. No harmful metabolism, it consumes acetaldehyde, and it has a low diacetyl production. So we are not making buttery wine with this bacteria. The application is basically anytime, early or late co-inoculation, sequential inoculation, but also since it's very resistant, you can use it for curative inoculation. How to use it? Direct inoculation, so the powder directly into the wine will work. Then, since we're talking about very low dosage, sometimes it's better to rehydrate it in chlorine-free water, and then you can just put it in your wine. So everyone is thinking co-inoculation for red. I would like to actually speak about co-inoculation for white and rosé also. It is a good option for rosé and white too. So why do I think it's a good option? Because it reduces diacetyl, which pretty much, at least in rosé, you don't want buttery character. It keeps your wine fresh and fruity, and it expresses the varietal characteristic. It ensures microbiological stability, which is very important for young white and rosé. It increases the speed of the process, so you can produce your wine faster, and it's actually helping the malolactic fermentation to go through when we are talking about difficult conditions such as low pH or even high pH. What would I recommend to use? Excellence TXL and NO1. Why Excellence TXL? Because it has all the requirements for co-inoculation. Strong implantation, regular fermentation kinetic, high alcohol resistance, low toxin producer, low VA, low SO2, low medium chain fatty acids, low to medium nitrogen requirement, and it's going to produce wines that are complex, elegant, varietal, fresh, delicate, and very round. So this usually goes with the style of wine you do malolactic fermentation. Okay, so now this was our most important requirement for co-inoculation to happen properly. The yeast and bacteria couple. Excellence XR and NO1 for red, Excellence TXL and NO1 for white and rosé. Let's talk about application and troubleshooting. Application, you want a perfect alcoholic fermentation, so use the right yeast with a good nutrition management. Second point, you want good condition for malolactic fermentation, low SO2, lower than 8 grams per hectoliter at crusher, NO1 at 1 gram per hectoliter. If you are talking about red, you are going to make a hole in the cap and put it in the liquid. In white or rosé, it doesn't really matter. You don't want to conduct any aeration within 12 hours that follows the malolactic bacteria inoculation. And same thing with acid adjustment. Temperature needs to be below 86 Fahrenheit. Timing of addition, it depends of the sulfur you used on grapes. So if we are talking about 5 grams per hectoliters or lower, you can go between 12 and 24 hours after the beginning of alcoholic fermentation. If we are between 5 or 8 grams per hectoliters of sulfur, we are gonna wait 24 to 48 hours after the beginning of alcoholic fermentation. I'm insisting in beginning of alcoholic fermentation because I'm talking about when it's a red wine, it means when the caps start to go up, when there is an activity of the yeast. When it's red or when it's white or rosé, it's when the bricks will start to go down. So as soon as the bricks start to go down, you count 12 hours and you're good to go. Okay? Now, if you use the right yeast and bacteria couple and you respect these few requirements, your malolactic and alcoholic fermentation are going to happen together, and probably the malolactic is going to finish within few days after alcoholic fermentation. Okay, so then there is many studies that done on co-inoculation that report that in 90% of the case, malolactic fermentation is going to end up few days after alcoholic fermentation. Then you have 9% of the case where malolactic fermentation is ending before alcoholic fermentation, which start to be the concern, but in reality, if you use the right yeast and bacteria couple, it's not. What you want to do is you want to make sure you don't bring oxygen, so you are not pushing the bacteria to go towards the sugar and start to make VA. And you want to check your VA. If it happens that your VA increase, you just put some sulfur, 2 grams per hectoliters, to inhibit the bacteria. You can use lysozyme or ketosane as well. And you let your fermentation going. If your fermentation, alcoholic fermentation, is stuck, you need to put sulfur or lysozyme or ketosane and then proceed to a restart. Then in 0.9% of the case, we have the alcoholic fermentation that finish and malolactic that is very slow. In this case, that's a problem of toxin and nutrition. So we need to use a nutrient for bacteria and a toxin remover such as Optiflor O that will help you finish your malolactic fermentation. Optiflor O can be used in any situation, sequential or co-inoculation. And as you can see on the graph here, it has a very strong detoxifiant effect where we are reducing the pesticide level and we are reducing the medium chain fatty acids level. So in most of the case, when you use Optiflor O at 20 grams per hectoliters, you are gonna finish your malolactic fermentation smoothly. Last case scenario, 0.1%. We end up alcoholic fermentation. We didn't start malolactic in this case. Just want to check your malolactic VA and the bacteria that are present there and make a restart of fermentation. So to summarize, co-inoculation, for me at least, is the answer to many difficult malolactic fermentation situations. It is a solution of the future with risk as everything, always, but risks that are very easy to manage, very few requirements. So Many advantages to co-inoculation. We are adapted to difficult conditions. We are securing malolactic fermentation. We are reducing spoilage risk. We are improving quality or changing, making wine fresher, fruitier, cleaner. And also, we are reducing the cost of production and we are being more sustainable. Requirement, use the right yeast bacteria couple. And if the malolactic fermentation is too difficult, use Optiflor O. So I would like to thank you for your attention. I'm gonna now do a question and answer. So thank you very much for your attention. You can contact me at eglantine.chauffour at buchervaslin.com, and you can visit our website here as well. So I hope you enjoy the webinar, and I will see you for our next one. Thank you, and now question and answer.